Captain Elias Vance gripped the railing of the starship's observation deck as the planetary surface of Zephyr swelled in the viewport. His breath fogged the glass, but he hardly noticed. Zephyr, a planet of jagged cerulean mountains, bioluminescent forests, and auroras that painted the skies in shifting hues of crimson and gold, was unlike any other place he had surveyed in his 20-year career as a cosmic cartographer. He'd explored desolate moons, unyielding deserts, and sprawling alien metropolises, but something about Zephyr's haunting beauty and the cryptic warnings in the old Alliance archives tugged at his curiosity. Elias was no ordinary explorer. A decorated veteran turned interstellar adventurer, he carried the weight of a restless soul and an insatiable need to uncover the unknown. His ship, the Zephyr, was both his fortress and his companion, a retrofitted marvel of human engineering designed for long-term expeditions. Its AI, Lyra, had been his only company on more nights than he cared to count. "Captain," Lyra's voice chimed, smooth and calming, "we're approaching the landing coordinates. Scans show extensive biodiversity in the area, but there's an anomalous energy signature approximately 5 kilometers from a landing zone." "Anomalous?" Elias asked, raising an eyebrow. His hand instinctively moved to the holster at his hip, where his plasma revolver rested. "Define anomalous." "Unclassified. It's unlike anything in our database," Lyra replied. "It's faint, but distinct. Organic and something else." The prospect of encountering something uncharted set Elias's pulse racing. The Galactic Alliance's strict protocols advised against venturing into areas with unknown phenomena, but Elias had long since stopped caring about rules written by bureaucrats who'd never set foot outside their sanitized offices. The Zephyr touched down softly on a grassy plateau overlooking a valley teeming with alien flora. The air shimmered faintly as Elias stepped out in his reinforced exosuit, a marvel of technology that allowed him to breathe the thin, methane-rich atmosphere of Zephyr. The scent of the planet was peculiar, metallic with an undercurrent of something sweet, like burnt sugar. He took a moment to scan his surroundings. Towering trees with translucent leaves exuded a faint glow, and strange, insect-like creatures flitted through the air, their wings trailing sparks of light. Elias's gaze shifted to the mountains in the distance, their jagged peaks wreathed in mist. Somewhere out there was the source of the anomaly, and he intended to find it. He checked his gear one last time, plasma revolver, utility belt, drone pack, before setting off toward the unknown. The trek was arduous, the terrain shifting from soft moss-covered ground to sharp, crystalline outcroppings that threatened to tear through his suit. As he ascended a narrow ridge, a low, rumbling roar echoed through the valley. It was a sound that didn't belong to the wind or the rustling of alien foliage. Elias froze, every nerve in his body on edge. Then he saw it. A massive creature soared through the sky, its wingspan easily spanning 20 meters. Its scales shimmered like molten gold, and its serpentine body coiled and uncoiled with a grace that defied its size. But it wasn't the dragon-like alien that stole Elias's breath. It was what the creature carried in its talons, a small, squirming bundle wrapped in what appeared to be a human blanket. Elias's heart thundered in his chest. A human baby. Here, on a planet light years from Earth. The implications were staggering, but there was no time to dwell on them. The creature's trajectory suggested it was heading toward a cave high in the mountains. "Lyra, are you seeing this?" Elias whispered, activating his suit's recorder. "Affirmative," Lyra replied. Her voice held an edge of disbelief. "This is unprecedented. Tell me you're getting readings on that thing," Elias said, his eyes glued to the creature as it disappeared into the mist. "Energy readings off the scale," Lyra said. "Organic composition is unlike anything documented. And the infant, Captain, we need more data. Elias nodded, his jaw set. He had no intention of leaving without answers. Whatever was happening on Zephyr, it was bigger than anything he'd encountered before. And he wasn't about to let some alien dragon, or whatever it was, disappear with a human child. As the mist thickened and the path grew more treacherous, Elias tightened his grip on his plasma revolver and pressed forward. The hunt was on. The jagged trail wound upward, its path slick with condensation from the mist clinging to the mountain. Elias moved cautiously, his boots crunching against sharp shards of crystalline rock. The faint hum of his suit's environmental stabilizers filled his ears, a low, constant reminder of just how alien Zephyr's atmosphere truly was. Above him, the crimson and gold auroras undulated across the sky like living things, casting eerie reflections on the terrain. As he climbed higher, the valley below faded from view, replaced by the oppressive closeness of the fog-drenched mountainside. Every sound, from the faint crackle of shifting rocks to the distant screeches of unseen creatures, seemed amplified in the stillness. But Elias had learned long ago to focus on what mattered, the trail ahead and the mystery waiting at its end. Lyra, update on the creature's trajectory, Elias said, his voice low but firm. The energy signature is stationary, approximately 1.2 kilometers ahead and 300 meters higher in elevation, Lyra responded. The cave entrance should be visible soon. Good. Keep scanning for anything unusual, Elias replied, pausing briefly to survey the path ahead. His hand hovered near his plasma revolver, a subconscious habit born of countless encounters with the unexpected. The faint roar of cascading water reached his ears, drawing his attention to the right. A narrow stream tumbled down the rocks, its waters glowing faintly with bioluminescent particles. It flowed into a series of shallow pools, each surrounded by moss-like vegetation that pulsed with soft light. For a moment, Elias allowed himself to marvel at the beauty of it all. Zephyr's ecosystem was unlike anything he'd ever seen, a perfect balance of the serene and the otherworldly. But the moment of quiet reflection was short-lived. A sudden rustling to his left snapped him back into focus. Elias dropped into a crouch, his eyes scanning the mist for any sign of movement. The rustling grew louder, closer, and then a creature emerged from the fog. It was quadrupedal, with sleek, obsidian-colored skin that seemed to absorb the light around it. Its elongated limbs ended in razor-sharp claws, and its head, if it could be called that, was a featureless oval, save for a pair of glowing, amber-hued eyes. Elias held his breath, his finger brushing against the trigger of his revolver. The creature's eyes locked onto him, unblinking and predatory. It let out a low, guttural growl, the sound vibrating through the air like a tangible force. Lyra, analysis, Elias whispered, keeping his weapon trained on the creature. Unknown species, Lyra replied, her tone calm but urgent. Energy readings indicate heightened aggression. Recommend non-lethal deterrence if possible. Elias cursed under his breath. He activated the suit's external speakers and emitted a high-frequency pulse designed to disorient hostile fauna. The creature recoiled, its growl turning into a screech as it scrambled back into the mist. Elias didn't wait to see if it would return. He pressed on, his heart pounding as he put as much distance as possible between himself and the encounter. The cave entrance loomed into view minutes later, a dark maw carved into the mountainside. Strange glyphs, faintly glowing and alien in design, adorned the rock around the opening. Elias paused to examine them, his gloved fingers tracing the intricate patterns. They felt warm to the touch, as if the stone itself were alive. "Lyra, record these glyphs," Elias said. "I've never seen anything like this." Recording, Lyra confirmed. Preliminary analysis suggests these markings are a form of advanced symbology, possibly tied to the energy signature within. Elias's unease deepened. The glyphs felt like a warning, though their meaning remained elusive. He stepped into the cave, his suit's built-in lights activating automatically. The air inside was cooler, heavier, and carried a faint metallic tang that prickled at the back of his throat. The walls glistened with moisture, and strange, root-like structures hung from the ceiling, their tips glowing faintly. As he ventured deeper, the cave widened into a vast chamber illuminated by an otherworldly light. In the center of the chamber stood the creature he had seen earlier, the dragon-like being with shimmering gold scales. It perched on a rocky outcropping, its talons gently cradling the bundle that Elias now recognized as a human infant. The child's cries echoed faintly, mingling with the rhythmic pulse of the chamber's strange energy. Elias froze, his mind racing. The creature regarded him with piercing, intelligent eyes, its gaze a mixture of caution and something almost protective. For the first time in his career, Elias felt truly out of his depth. Whatever was happening here, it was far beyond his understanding, and the answers lay in the hands of an alien being unlike any he had ever encountered. Elias stood rooted to the spot, his breathing shallow, as he faced the golden creature. The infant's cries grew softer, almost as if the presence of the alien being was lulling it into a strange calm. His hand hovered near his revolver, but he hesitated to draw. The creature's posture wasn't overtly aggressive. Instead, it exuded an aura of vigilance, as though protecting something sacred. This wasn't a predator, it was a guardian. The chamber's light emanated from an intricate network of crystalline veins embedded in the walls and floor. The glow pulsed rhythmically, casting shifting patterns of gold and blue across the cavern's surfaces. The energy in the air was almost tangible, a faint hum that resonated in Elias's chest. It felt alive, connected to the creature and the strange glyphs at the cave's entrance. "Lyra," Elias whispered, barely daring to move, "are you recording this?" "Every detail, Captain," Lyra replied. "The energy readings are unprecedented. This chamber is a focal point for the anomaly." Elias's eyes flicked to the infant, swaddled tightly in the human-made blanket. Its tiny fists waved in the air, and its face, though red from crying, bore an undeniable humanity. How had a human baby come to be on Zypher? And why was this alien creature safeguarding it? He took a cautious step forward, raising his hands to show he meant no harm. The creature's eyes narrowed, its tail curling protectively around the infant. A low rumble reverberated through the chamber, not a growl, but a sound that carried a warning. "Easy," Elias said softly. "I'm not here to hurt you or the child." The creature tilted its head, studying him with an intelligence that sent a chill down his spine. This wasn't a mindless beast. It understood him, or at least his intentions. Elias lowered himself to one knee, trying to appear less threatening. He set his revolver on the ground, sliding it away as a gesture of trust. "I just want to understand," he said. "Why are you protecting the baby? Where did it come from?" The creature's tail uncoiled slightly, but its grip on the infant remained firm. It let out a series of low, melodic sounds that echoed through the chamber. Elias frowned, straining to interpret. The sounds weren't random. They carried a cadence, a structure. Was it trying to communicate? "Lyra, can you analyze that?" Elias asked. "Processing," Lyra replied. "The vocalizations exhibit patterns consistent with language. However, There is insufficient data to translate. Elias exhaled slowly. Communication was a long shot, but he had to try. He reached into his pack and retrieved a small, round device, a universal translator designed to decipher alien languages. Holding it up, he activated it and spoke. "Can you understand me?" he asked. The creature's eyes flicked to the device, then back to Elias. It emitted another sequence of sounds, this time softer and more measured. The translator hummed, processing the input, but the output was garbled nonsense. Frustrated but undeterred, Elias decided to switch tactics. He reached into his pack again, this time pulling out a ration bar. He unwrapped it slowly, showing the creature the contents before taking a small bite. Then he placed the rest on the ground and slid it toward the creature. It sniffed the bar cautiously, its nostrils flaring, but made no move to take it. "Not hungry, huh?" Elias muttered. "Or maybe you don't trust me yet." The infant stirred in the creature's talons, letting out a soft whimper. The alien's gaze softened as it looked down at the child, its protective instincts apparent. Elias seized the moment to speak again. "You're protecting it, aren't you?" he said. "Why? Is it special to you? Or did someone leave it with you?" The creature's tail flicked, and it let out another melodic sound, this one tinged with a note of sorrow. Elias felt a pang of empathy. Whatever the circumstances, this alien had taken on the role of a guardian. Perhaps it was acting out of a sense of duty, or perhaps it had bonded with the child in some inexplicable way. "Lyra, is there any record of human expeditions to Zephyr?" Elias asked. "Checking archives," Lyra replied. After a pause, she said, "No documented human presence on Zephyr prior to your arrival. This situation remains an anomaly." Elias rubbed his temples, frustration mounting. The pieces of the puzzle weren't fitting together, and the only one who seemed to have answers couldn't share them. He glanced back at the creature, its golden scales glinting in the chamber's light. For all its otherworldly presence, it seemed almost lonely. "You're not just protecting it," Elias said, more to himself than to the creature. "You're connected to it somehow." "But how?" The creature shifted, its wings stretching slightly before folding back against its body. It lowered the infant gently onto a flat stone, keeping one talon resting protectively nearby. Then it looked at Elias, its gaze intense and searching. For a brief moment, Elias felt as though the creature could see straight through him, into the very core of who he was. "I'll figure this out," Elias murmured, his determination hardening. "Whatever brought us all here, you, me, and this child, I'll find the truth." Elias sat cross-legged on the rocky floor of the chamber, his mind racing through possible scenarios. He couldn't shake the feeling that everything in this moment, the child, the creature, the pulsating glyphs on the walls, was connected in ways he was only beginning to fathom. The low hum of the crystalline veins seemed to synchronize with his own heartbeat, a subtle reminder that this place was alive with energy far beyond human understanding. The creature watched him warily, its golden eyes glinting in the ambient light. The infant had fallen asleep, its tiny chest rising and falling in peaceful rhythm. Elias couldn't help but marvel at the juxtaposition of the scene, an alien dragon-like being cradling a human baby as if it were the most natural thing in the universe. "Lyra, I need a deeper analysis of this energy field," Elias said, breaking the silence. "Is it affecting me in any way?" "Scanning," Lyra replied. A moment later, she added, "Preliminary results indicate no immediate physical effects. However, the energy field appears to interact with neural activity, potentially enhancing cognitive functions and emotional sensitivity." "Emotional sensitivity," Elias muttered. "Great. Just what I need." He shifted his attention back to the creature. It had relaxed slightly, though its protective stance over the child remained firm. Elias decided to take a risk. He retrieved a small hollow projector from his pack and activated it. A three-dimensional image of Earth appeared, rotating slowly in the air between them. "This is where I come from," Elias said, gesturing to the projection. "Earth. Do you know it?" The creature tilted its head, its eyes narrowing as it studied the hologram. Its tail twitched, and it let out a low, melodic sound that resonated with the chamber's hum. Elias felt a strange pressure in his mind, a gentle but insistent presence that wasn't his own. He gasped, realizing the creature was attempting to communicate directly. "Lyra, are you picking this up?" Elias asked, his voice tight with both awe and apprehension. "Affirmative," Lyra replied. "The entity appears to be using a form of telepathic resonance. Recommend maintaining focus to facilitate understanding." Elias closed his eyes and steadied his breathing. The pressure in his mind intensified, but it wasn't painful. Instead, it felt like a stream of images and emotions flowing into his consciousness. He saw flashes of a vast, glittering city suspended in a sea of stars, its architecture organic and fluid. He felt the warmth of sunlight on his skin, accompanied by a deep sense of belonging. And then he saw the baby, not as it was now, but as part of a greater whole, a bridge between two worlds. "You're showing me memories?" Elias whispered, opening his eyes. The creature's gaze was unwavering, its presence in his mind fading slightly, but leaving behind a profound sense of understanding. The baby wasn't just a human child. It was a symbol, a nexus of shared destiny. The creature's protective instincts weren't born of chance. They were part of a purpose that transcended species or origins. Elias leaned forward, his voice soft but resolute. "I need to know how the baby came to be here. Was it brought to you? Or did you find it?" The creature responded with another melodic sound, and this time, the translator managed to produce a fragment of coherent output. "Gift entrusted bridge." "A gift?" Elias repeated, his brow furrowing. "Entrusted by whom?" The creature didn't answer directly, but the crystalline veins in the chamber brightened, their pulsing light accelerating. Elias felt another surge of telepathic resonance, and this time, the images were more fragmented but unmistakable. A group of human explorers standing in awe before the creature, a solemn exchange of gestures, and the baby's arrival in its care. The explorers' faces were indistinct, their identities obscured by the passage of time or the limits of the creature's memory. "There were others like me," Elias murmured. "Humans. They entrusted you with the baby. But why?" Before the creature could respond, a distant rumble echoed through the chamber, followed by a faint tremor beneath Elias's feet. The glyphs on the walls flickered, their glow dimming momentarily before stabilizing. The creature tensed, its wings flaring slightly as it scanned the chamber's entrance. "Lyra, what was that?" Elias asked, rising to his feet. "Seismic activity detected," Lyra said. "Source unknown. Recommend caution." Elias retrieved his revolver, his instincts sharpening. The creature let out a low growl, not directed at him, but at whatever threat might be approaching. It stepped forward, placing itself between Elias, the baby, and the entrance. For the first time, Elias felt a sense of camaraderie with the alien being. Whatever danger lay ahead, they were in this together. "All right," Elias said, gripping his weapon tightly. "Let's see what's coming." The tremor subsided, leaving an uneasy stillness in its wake. Elias exchanged a glance with the alien creature, whose wings remained half extended in a defensive posture. The baby, oblivious to the tension, stirred lightly in its makeshift cradle of scaled talons. The silence stretched, taut and foreboding, until Lyra's voice cut through it. "Captain, I'm detecting multiple energy signatures approaching from the northeast quadrant," she reported. "Their patterns suggest artificial constructs, potentially unmanned drones or piloted crafts." Elias's jaw tightened. "How long until they're here?" "Approximately 10 minutes at their current velocity," Lyra replied. "Recommend immediate relocation." The creature shifted, as if sensing the urgency in Elias's tone. It glanced toward the chamber's entrance, then back at the human, its gaze questioning. Elias raised a hand, hoping the gesture conveyed calm and trust. "We need to move," he said firmly, gesturing toward the opposite end of the chamber. A narrow passage, barely visible behind a curtain of crystalline stalactites, offered the only viable escape route. "Can you carry the baby?" The creature responded with a low trill, scooping up the infant with deliberate care. Elias couldn't help but notice the tenderness in its movements, a stark contrast to its imposing physique. He nodded and began to lead the way, his revolver at the ready. The passage was claustrophobic, its walls narrowing to the point where Elias had to turn sideways to squeeze through. The crystalline veins continued to illuminate their path, though their light seemed dimmer here, flickering as though in response to some unseen force. Behind him, the creature followed with surprising agility, its wings folded tightly against its body to navigate the confined space. "Lyra, any updates on the incoming signatures?" Elias asked as they pressed forward. "They've accelerated," Lyra said, her tone clipped. "Arrival in approximately 7 minutes. Additional scans indicate weaponized capabilities." Elias muttered a curse under his breath. Whoever or whatever was coming, they weren't here for a friendly chat. He pushed onward, the passage gradually widening until it opened into a cavernous expanse. The air here was cooler, tinged with the faint metallic scent of minerals. A shallow pool of water reflected the crystalline glow, casting shimmering patterns on the cavern ceiling. The creature paused, its gaze sweeping the area. It let out a series of soft clicks, as though probing the space for hidden dangers. Elias scanned the perimeter, his grip on the revolver tightening. The cavern seemed deserted, but he knew better than to trust appearances. "Lyra, can you map an escape route from here?" Elias asked. "Working on it," Lyra replied. "This area contains several interconnected chambers. I'll identify the optimal path." As Elias waited for Lyra's analysis, a distant hum reached his ears. It was faint but unmistakable, a mechanical droning that grew louder with each passing second. The creature heard it too. Its tail lashed, and it emitted a low growl that reverberated through the cavern. "We're out of time," Elias said. "Lyra, which way?" "Northwest passage," she replied. "It leads to a series of tunnels that should provide cover." Elias nodded and gestured for the creature to follow. They moved quickly, their footsteps echoing off the cavern walls. The baby let out a soft cry, its voice muffled against the creature's chest. Elias glanced back, his stomach tightening. The sound would only make it easier for their pursuers to track them. They reached the northwest passage just as the droning noise grew deafening. Elias risked a look over his shoulder and felt his blood run cold. 3 sleek, metallic drones hovered at the cavern's entrance, their chassis bristling with weaponry. Twin beams of red light scanned the area, slicing through the darkness like predatory eyes. "Move," Elias barked, pushing the creature ahead. He raised his revolver and fired a shot at the nearest drone. The bullet ricocheted off its armored hull, sparking harmlessly. The drone's sensors locked onto him, and a barrage of energy bolts erupted in response. Elias dove for cover behind a jagged outcrop, the heat from the blasts searing the air around him. "Lyra, suggestions," he shouted. "The drones are shielded," Lyra said. "Conventional weapons will be ineffective. However, the crystalline structures in this cavern emit frequencies that may disrupt their systems. If you can create a large enough resonance, it could overload their circuitry." Elias glanced at the glowing veins in the walls. "How do I do that?" "Apply force to the crystalline structures," Lyra said. "The resulting vibrations should amplify within the chamber." "Got it," Elias muttered. He holstered his revolver and grabbed a loose chunk of rock. Sprinting toward one of the crystalline formations, he slammed the rock against it with all his strength. The crystal emitted a high-pitched tone that quickly escalated in intensity, resonating throughout the cavern. The drones faltered, their movements jerky as the resonance grew. Sparks erupted from their chassis, and one by one, they dropped to the ground lifeless. The sudden silence was almost as jarring as the noise had been. Elias leaned against the wall, his chest heaving. The creature approached, the baby still cradled safely in its talons. It looked at Elias with what he could only interpret as gratitude. "That was too close," he said, wiping sweat from his brow. "Let's keep moving. Whatever's hunting us won't stop with just a few drones." The creature nodded, its gaze resolute. Together, they disappeared into the tunnels, the faint glow of the crystals lighting their path as the shadows closed in behind them. The air was electric, pulsating with the convergence of energies that had been building since Elias first stepped foot in the ancient cavern. He could feel it in his bones, a deep, resonant hum that seemed to vibrate in tune with his heartbeat. The creature, now standing tall and radiant, emitted a faint glow of its own, its golden eyes locked onto the approaching threat. From the shadows of the tunnel ahead emerged a towering, humanoid figure clad in sleek, obsidian armor. The figure moved with an eerie fluidity, its every step sending ripples of unease through the air. In its hand was a staff that crackled with blue energy, casting jagged reflections on the crystalline walls. Behind it, more drones hovered silently, their weapons trained on Elias and the creature. "Surrender the child," the figure commanded, its voice distorted and mechanical. It wasn't a request, it was an ultimatum. Elias stepped forward, his revolver drawn but lowered. "Who are you? What do you want with the baby?" he demanded, his voice steady despite the fear coiling in his chest. The figure tilted its head slightly, as if amused. "The child is the key to balance, an anomaly that must be controlled. Hand it over, and your lives will be spared." Elias glanced at the creature, whose stance had shifted to one of fierce protectiveness. The baby stirred in its arms, letting out a soft, plaintive cry that seemed to echo through the chamber. In that moment, Elias knew there would be no surrender. The stakes were far greater than his own survival. "You'll have to go through us first," Elias said, raising his revolver. The figure's response was immediate. With a flick of its staff, it unleashed a wave of energy that sent Elias sprawling to the ground. The creature roared, its wings unfurling as it launched itself at the intruder. The cavern erupted into chaos, the crystalline walls amplifying every sound and light into a symphony of destruction. Elias scrambled to his feet, his vision blurred, but his resolve unshaken. He fired at the drones, each shot precise and deliberate. Sparks flew as one, then another, crashed to the ground. The figure, however, was a far greater challenge. It moved within human speed, parrying the creature's strikes with effortless grace. Their battle was a blur of claws, wings, and crackling energy, each blow sending shockwaves through the chamber. "Lyra, I need options," Elias shouted, dodging a stray blast. "The crystalline structures in this chamber are linked to a central nexus," Lyra replied. "If you can overload the nexus, it could neutralize the energy weapons and disable the drones." Elias's gaze darted to the largest crystal formation at the chamber's center. It pulsed with a steady rhythm, its glow intensifying with each second. "How do I overload it?" "A focused energy discharge should suffice," Lyra said. "But be warned, the resulting explosion will be highly unstable." "Figures," Elias muttered. He turned to the creature. "Hold them off. I'll handle the crystal." The creature let out a guttural roar, its movements becoming more aggressive as it fought to keep the figure at bay. Elias sprinted toward the crystal, dodging debris and energy blasts. He reached it just as a drone descended, its weapon primed. With a well-placed shot, he disabled the drone and turned his attention to the glowing structure. He placed both hands on the crystal surface, feeling its warmth radiate through his gloves. "Lyra, give me a charge from my suit's power core," he said. "Acknowledged," Lyra replied. "Discharging in 3, 2, 1. A surge of energy coursed through Elias's body, channeling into the crystal. The chamber's hum rose to a deafening crescendo as the crystal's glow became blinding. Elias stumbled back, shielding his eyes as the energy erupted in a brilliant cascade of light and sound. The explosion rippled outward, disabling the drones and sending the armored figure flying into the cavern wall. The creature shielded the baby with its wings, weathering the blast with a defiant roar. When the light faded, the chamber was silent save for the faint crackle of dissipating energy. Elias staggered to his feet, his ears ringing. The armored figure lay motionless, its staff shattered beside it. The creature approached, the baby still cradled safely in its arms. It looked at Elias with an expression that transcended language, gratitude, respect, and an unspoken bond forged in the crucible of survival. "We did it," Elias said, his voice hoarse. He reached out to touch the baby's tiny hand, which grasped his finger with surprising strength. In that moment, he felt a profound sense of purpose, as if every choice, every hardship had led him to this. The creature let out a soft trill, gesturing toward the cavern's exit. Together, they began the long journey back to the surface, leaving the ruins of the battle behind. As they emerged into the starlit night, Elias looked up at the endless expanse of space and felt a spark of hope. The baby's cry broke the silence, a sound full of life and possibility. Elias smiled, his heart swelling with determination. Whatever lay ahead, he knew they would face it together. And for the first time in a long while, he believed in a future worth fighting for.